Hello, good morning, Sitaram, and welcome to another program in the series, Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, Ram Naresh Dwarika, as usual, welcoming everyone in Trinidad and Tobago, up the Caribbean, and all of those people who are following on social media. And just to let you know at the outset that this program is being recorded. It will be posted on YouTube and Facebook soon after its completion this morning. And it will also be repeated on this radio and television station, that is Radio and TV Jagriti, at 10 p.m. tonight. So that if you have questions, you can post them on my chat. You can also post them at YouTube and Facebook. You can also call the numbers on your screen after the program, or you can text during the program at the number 67685925, and I will attempt to answer your questions. This morning, I'm going to deal with one of what most people will consider the most important topic. I've had most of the questions coming to me related to this particular aspect of alcoholism and drug addiction, and that is how to get an alcoholic or drug addict to seek help. And so this morning, I want us to discuss strategies that actually work, because people, I know that families out of frustration, employers as well, and co-workers, colleagues, friends, they try every method known to them. And sometimes most of it don't work because as we discuss later on in the program, you know, threatening the person and all of those things, insulting, being aggressive to them, violent even, those things don't work. They may probably cause a person to promise to stop and all of that, but to sustain sobriety will not work with these kinds of methods. So this morning I want to especially look at some of the methods. But first, we need to understand why an alcoholic or drug addict who's educated, who's intelligent, who is successful, how they can't seem or why they can't seem to understand the role that the drug is playing in their life, and why is it they refuse to accept help. Well, the first thing is a lot of people do not, even family members, nor the alcoholic or drug addict, understand that this is a disease. It is not a moral failing. It is a chronic and progressive disease, and it has been recognized by the World Health Authority, by our own Ministry of Health, the Pan American Health Organization as well, as a disease. Just like diabetes, just like hypertension, it's a lifestyle disease. And for most people without help, professional help, they are really not able to make it. So many family members, professionals, and community workers struggle with the same question. How do we motivate a person who doesn't want help? Because I have heard that, and in fact, being a person in recovery myself, I do remember, I never thought I had a problem. I thought other people had a problem in my drinking and so on. They just did not want to see me have a good time. I felt I was entitled, you know, to that because I didn't play cricket or football or gamble or any one of those things. So I saw no harm in taking a few drinks, except that a few drinks led to fewer more drinks and then a whole other problem. So in today's lecture, I want to explore practical and compassionate strategies that help to move the alcoholic or drug addict from denial to acceptance and action. The purpose of this program this morning, some of the objectives I would like to achieve is that at the end of it, we should understand why addicts resist help, and to learn tools to increase motivation for change. 3, discover proven intervention methods. And 4, understand how to support long-term recovery. hopefully, in the time given, we could do justice to these objectives. So at first, why does addict resist help? Well, I did mention denial. Denial is a defense mechanism. There's denial and there's also minimization. Denial is a defense mechanism that all human beings use. You know, if somebody passed away, somebody close to you, the first reaction, no, man, no, 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 no. I talked to him this morning or yesterday. It is not possible that he could have passed away. And so we use denial to help us to cope. No, this is not happening with me, you know, until we could eventually accept it. So too with alcoholism and drug addiction. A lot of alcoholics who is obviously affected by their drinking or drug use, but they will tell you, I don't have a problem. And one of the reasons is that addiction, the dependence on drug, for so many other reasons, as we will look at, causes changes in the brain actually. It affects the person's judgment and reasoning and planning ability, and so that the person actually lose that sense of self-awareness. They have been living in that state for so long that this self-awareness is reduced. So that what you are seeing, they are not seeing. They are literally not allowing themselves to see the problem. Now, there are few that, especially, and that is what this program is about. It's about educating the not only the alcoholic and the drug addict, but the family members and the community, so that we would understand what we are dealing with and how to deal with it. Now, one of the first things we need to understand is that a lot of addicts and alcoholics, people who have become dependent on drugs, especially when they start becoming physically dependent. That is like when they can't sleep if they didn't drink. They have the shakes now where they can't write. They're feeling depressed or they're feeling anxious when they don't have it. These are all called withdrawal symptoms because anything, there's a principle in nature, whatever goes up must come down. And so that whatever you use to get high or to help you to cope, when it is wearing away, you are going to go into what is called withdrawal. And withdrawal could be very painful and scary. For some people, they actually begin to hallucinate and see things coming to attack them and all of that in withdrawal. That's in the chronic users. So that a lot of people, because, well, they did not intend to stop, but it just didn't have it available to them at the time, and they would have gone through withdrawal. And that has reinforced a kind of fear inside of them that they don't even want to think about stopping because of the suffering they went through. And think about a cigarette smoker who ran out of cigarette and can't find any cigarettes to buy. No one around has cigarettes, and they go through withdrawal. And it is, they become very irritable, some of them become depressed and so on. So that for the fear, because of the fear of withdrawal, a lot of people do not even want to initiate abstinence. Then, of course, there's the whole question of shame and stigma that is associated with drinking and drug use. So that the person does not even want to admit that they have a problem to start with, because they don't want to admit to the accusations and the labeling and all of that. So that we know in social work and in counseling and all of that, you cannot help anybody who don't think they have a problem, who will not admit that they have a problem. First, before you could, if you have a tap broken and you don't think it's a problem, well, then it will remain running. A problem is only one of definition, so that the person has to first admit and accept that they have a problem. Otherwise, you can't help them. They will not want to even accept help. So the shame keeps them very silent. Now, I can tell you, a lot of people are aware they have a problem. They know that, but they are not willing to accept help. We were fed on a diet of being self-sufficient. Our parents and our siblings sometimes, they will tell you, when you're small, look, man, you're big enough to comb your hair now. You're big enough to go and take a shower. You're big enough to do this, big enough to do that. So we pride ourselves and we aspire to becoming self-sufficient, you know, so that we can really establish our own individuality as being, a person who can take care of their stories, as we say. But here comes a problem with alcohol or drugs. And now it has us over the barrel, as we say, and we can't seem to be able to fix it. But we are not willing to admit that we are failing, that we can't fix it. So some people will try fixing it into the gates of insanity and death, actually, without becoming willing. And I'm sure some of you listeners know people like that who went down, in the drain. Life went to pieces, but they will not admit or accept that they had a problem, because of pride. Pride becomes a barrier, even in families, worse off in the community. And sometimes the family themselves go into denial. They don't want anybody to know that one of theirs has a problem with alcohol or drugs. And so they will cover up. They will not, especially women. It is so, it's okay for a man to drink, but it's not so okay for women to be drunk at the rum shop and all of that. So that families will tend to cover up that. They will not even send them for treatment. Well, I do know some people will bring them privately to counselors like myself, or they will take them to other professionals. And well, at least that's one method. And I want all listeners to pay attention to this, because especially before the alcoholic or drug addict reach the chronic stage of addiction and dependence, they are, a lot of them, using the drugs to self-medicate, as we say, like you would use medicine. So when they feel depressed, they take a drink or they take a smoke. Or when they feel anxious, they take a drink or they take a smoke. And it is helping them to cope. And for those people who are stressed out on the job, who are going through separation and divorce, who have matters in the court, and who can't sleep in the night, they all start using these various substances to help them to cope. And yes, at first it works, but for some people, it can now cause severe withdrawal problems or cause them to get into trouble, because there are different kinds of alcoholics and drug addicts. Let me talk about alcoholics in particular. There are those who will drink and get drunk and then go and sleep, and they'll cause too much problems. Then there are those who would like to, like me, sing and entertain and all of that. But then there are those who now, when they drink, they want to go and drive. They want to tell the neighbor what they had on their mind, and they become all the things that they had pent up inside against the spouse and the brother, and they 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 now is the time they find that they can ventilate it, when they drink, and of course it leads to trouble. Then there's the other side of it where, they're drinking to sleep in the night, but they can't get up to go to work the next morning. So it starts to cause problems on the job and all of that. Now, people rarely seek help until the pain outweighs the benefits. And I want to speak about that, because I've often said on this program that no drug addict or no alcoholic is going to stop using unless to continue to use becomes more painful than stopping. Because when he stops, he goes into withdrawal, right? And this is very painful. So a lot of people opt to continue to use and try all kinds of strategies so they could continue to use without getting into withdrawal. And there are those who change the chaser, change the blend, change all kinds of things in the hope that they will not get sick and suffer withdrawal. But then There are those who are enabled by relatives, spouses, mothers, parents, siblings, colleagues as well, who clock the person card so they will not get into trouble on the job, or supervisors who write good reports in spite of what has been happening, and wives who clean up after the alcoholic vomit the place and call the job and say, he had bad food to eat, he can't come, and he's sick from that, can't come to work. And we make all kinds of excuses. And parents who go and pay the pushers, and take the bail and get the best lawyers to take them off the hook. And we continue to enable them to continue to limp along and continue to be addicted. We feed into the addiction. So now the process of recovery, you know, could be and scientifically described it into four. Basically, the whole process is about six separate sections. One is the pre-contemplation. That is the stage where the person is drinking, they're using, but they don't see it as a problem. And I just spoke about that. They are using it to help them cope. It is still working for them. They are managing, they're still managing the job and holding the family together, but they are struggling, and they are aware, you know, but they don't want to admit it because of the shame and the pride and the ego and all of that. So they are thinking about it, but they're not talking about it, you know. But then there's the contemplation stage where, like we say in Trinidad, water more than flour. So now you're faced with it and you're thinking, well, look, maybe I need to do something about this thing. But at this stage, most alcoholics and drug addicts will try every strategy they know, to see if they could stop. They will try getting off the wagon, like, not drinking for a few days, or changing the blends, changing the chaser, all kinds of strategies. Some people drinking magnesia before they go to drink, or drinking oil so that they, I've heard all kinds of stories in my business. And then there's the person who has reached the stage where they realize they're sensible enough, they're honest enough to know, well, hey, I can't make it anymore. I'm too, I'm tired of being sick and tired. And they say, well, all right, I am willing to make a change. And they are willing to get help. And I have a lot of people, eventually, the parents, the mother or the wife would call and say, look, I think he would like to stop. He's saying that, he wants to do it. And that's the time when they'll call and make an appointment to come in and see me. But usually this happens, what really, and last week I spoke about the precipitating factors. It takes some time, a crisis. Something happened. You go to the doctor and he says, look, your liver, if you continue to drink, you're going to drop dead. Your liver is compromised. Or the police arrested you for drinking and driving, and this is the second or third time. This time you're going to go to jail when you go before the magistrate, unless you do. And so a lot of people are coming seeking help because of these things, of the breathalyzer now, or the wife would have probably left the home. And family members need to capitalize on these, or the employer might say, look, you're suspended because of some accident you created on the job. You understand? These are the turning points, the pivotal moments that could help the person to accept help. And you need to capitalize on it, so that when the wife is estranged and I know he's coming just to get back the wife, but I will let the wife know that, look, he needs to prove himself by going to meetings or going for treatment and staying off before you just rush back into the home. It takes some amount of counseling and understanding for people to relate to these things, what is called tough love. And the action is the person goes for treatment or they goes to AA or NA or one of those, and they start staying sober. Now, stopping the crisis might have caused them to stop, but to remain stopped is really the challenge because the mind operates like this. And if you have a crisis or any of any sort, it is estimated that a crisis redefines itself. We studied this in something called crisis intervention. Within 6 weeks, the person will redefine the crisis and they will not be as acutely affected. And this is why, even though a person might have stopped because of the police charged them or they got into a serious accident or something, some critical event happened with them, and that will probably, you know, cause them to stop at the moment. But to be able to stay stopped, they need to have continuous support, which could be done through counseling, through AA, NA, and these support groups, and the family, so that now some people, even though they're going to meetings and they come in for counseling, they may relapse still because you have been using these drugs for so long to help you to cope that it is like second nature. That in a critical moment, a person, the first thing their minds go to is, you know what, I have to take a drink. I need to take a drink. I feel if I don't take a drink, I'm going to die, or smoke. And they go and they do it. And then they're regretting. I've heard them, I'm so sorry that I did it. I wish I hadn't. Now I was so many days or months sober, or even years, and look what has happened. Well, I want to let you know that all is not lost because relapse is part of recovery. There are some people who are going to make it in one go, but there are so many people who may relapse a few times before they eventually make it. Because let me illustrate this. Some people might think, well, they're going to counseling and they come into counseling, let's suppose, see me, and I'm telling them, look, you need to stay away from slippery people and slippery places and so on. But because of loneliness and the kind of friends they had, they don't want to lose their friends. So without telling me or disclosing it, they go and still lie in with those friends. They're not drinking, but they just because we are social animals. We don't want to live alone. So we go and they're drinking the beers and the whatever, and I'm drinking soft drink or drinking you know some non-alcoholic thing. But and I may be able to do it. The person may be able to do that for some time. But then there comes that day when they have had a bad day, something critical has happened, and they go on to the shop and they don't even realize it when they hand reached out and say, look, what, and the friends only happy to, there's a saying that misery likes company. And the friends say, well, one will not do it because, they're talking with the friends, boy, my wife giving me trouble or my father, or they doing this or that. Look, man, take a drink, that go calm your nerves. And from tomorrow on, you're going to start checking again. You're bound to drink. And for the alcoholic, that is a death sentence. Because there's a slogan, if you ever went to an AA meeting, you'll see a slogan which says, one too many, 20 not enough. For the alcoholic, one drink is too many. Because after you take that one drink, 99% of the time he will want to take another drink. And most of the time he will go on, and that will start the whole merry-go-round all over again. So the thing is, every alcoholic goes through these stages. The pre-contemplation, they go through the contemplation, they go through a period of preparation, then there's action and maintenance, and relapse is part of that process. Some may go through it faster, some may take years, of drinking, getting into trouble, still in, rationalizing, maybe I didn't eat, that's why I got drunk, or maybe they provoked me, otherwise I wouldn't have done that, or maybe they don't like me, it's not my drinking. And alcoholics go through all of these kinds of stories they call rationalizations. But they need to go through that. Some with professional interventions, you can take them from pre-contemplation through the process much more quicker. And I'll discuss this as we go along. One of the processes that can be used is what is called motivational interviewing. And in my training and in my practice, that is what I did for many years. I still do that. It's a conversational method that reduces resistance and increases willingness. So, first, I would want to make an evaluation as to whether the person is really an alcoholic. If a person came to see me, in spite of the fact that the mother and the father and the brothers and whoever think the person is an alcoholic because they're drinking, there are people who are heavy drinkers, but they're not alcoholics. And as a professional, I am able to make that differentiation. So I will do an evaluation honestly, and if the person is not an alcoholic, I will tell them so. But if they're alcoholic, I will, of course, tell them so and tell them why. I'll show them, discuss the symptoms and help. And I have moved a lot of people from denial to motivation, even in one session, to the point where, and a lot of people, they realize, you may bring them to the point where they realize, yes, I have a problem. Now I could make the connections. I realize is the drinking that is causing the problems on the job. Drinking is causing the arguments. Most of the conflicts that I've had were prefaced by a bout of drinking, and you help them to see the relationship, and okay, they realize, well, but then they need to know how to come off, because a person who has become dependent on alcohol or drugs is like a man who had an accident and broke his leg and has now become dependent on crutches. And the few time he tried to walk without the crutches, he fell down, just like the fellow who relapsed, who trying to stay sober. And now he's convinced himself, I can't walk without the crutches. Like the addict convinces himself after a few relapses that, look, and his family too. Boy, we took him to Cora, we took him to Mr. Dwarika for counseling. He went to AA, and look, he can't stop. You know what? He got a drink and dead. A lot of family members, they actually believe that in their mind. And the alcoholic or drug addict feels the same way. But that is not true. That is the time the person has reached rock bottom, as we say, when nothing else seemed to work. That is the time he's ready to accept, well, no, and surrender and fully accept the advice of the counselor and the program of recovery he's being offered in the various programs of Alcoholics Anonymous and so on. So the thing is, when speaking, and this is to professionals as well, we never talk down to an alcoholic. You don't even call them by the drinking name. Some people get nicknames, bunker drunk and all kind of thing, or nicknames. You treat the person, you start off the relationship with one of mutual respect. Mr. So and so. You call them by their surname because you are not their friend. You understand? So that you treat them with respect, and you would want to ask them, not you know say to them what you see. No, you want to ask them, well, how is your drinking affecting your health, and let them reflect on it. You know, or or their finances or their relationships. You know, and then you may want to make reflective statements like, you're tired of fighting with your family, because these will see and these are things that actually happens that you can use to help the person to develop what is called insight. And then you may want to highlight discrepancies. He might think, well, look, if he make more money, he will not have financial problems. You need to help him to realize that if he stopped the drinking and manage his finances well, he will not have a financial problem. That drinking is taking a lot of the money. So these are some of the strategies that one may want to consider. Now, the wrong way is really yelling at him and threatening him and lecturing him down and all of those things. Those don't work. Nobody likes to be talked down to, especially alcoholics. And alcoholics themselves and drug addicts become rebellious. You tell them not to do it just out of spite, as we say, rebellion, they will go and do it because they don't want anybody telling them what to do. That is like taking away their individuality, their manhood. But you may want to say, look, it hurt me to see what has happened with you. Because I love you, I care about you. And when these things happen, it hurts me. And although, you know, I cannot continue to help you if you continue to use drugs, because if you continue to use drugs, you are going to continue to have these problems. And I will be enabling you to continue. I can't enable you to continue to be sick. But I promise you, if you decide to do something about it, if you would like to stop, you have 100% of my support. You understand? This is the kind of conversations you want to have with them. But you're not going to speak to them when they are drunk. You're wasting your time. You're not speaking to them at all. You're literally talking to someone else. So the best time I have found for family members is like if they drank last night, this morning, they're in remorse, they're having a hangover. That's the time they're most likely to respond to listen because they are feeling the pangs of their behavior. And of course, a lot of people have used professional interventions very successfully. They have a pre-planning session where you talk to the counselor, he sets it up. People, family members, children will write letters that they will read about incidents and how it affected them. I know this has worked for many people. When the children spoke to them and said, Dad, this is what happened. Look at these children. The teachers called me today because I was sleeping in class, because I couldn't sleep all night last night because you and mommy were fighting. And I had to tell him, what happened. And the teacher says he wants to talk to you. I know one person who, because of that situation, is now many years sober. And of course, letters from family members that could be read during this session facilitated by a professional, you know, and the session must be a calm session, not people raising their voices, and must be managed. And in such sessions, the person it must be well thought out because you have to you have to show them that you can help them with the detox, the withdrawal symptoms, that detox is available. Now, it is also important when a person agrees coming out of a session like that, there must be a plan. There must be resources in place to help them to sustain the sobriety. Now, in my case here, I use acupuncture to successfully detox people. And then I schedule counseling sessions like once a week. I also refer people to go to Alcoholics Anonymous as a support group and so on. And this has been working successfully. There are some people, however, I may have to refer to an in-house treatment program, especially people who live in a high-risk environment where they're surrounded by friends who are using and drinking, or family members, or they're living on a block, or they're living, they have a rum shop, for instance, or this environment is too stressful for them. They don't have the support. So for people like that, in the assessment stage, it is very, very often it is indicated that they may need to be put into an in-house program for a short period. So at least they can begin and stabilize their sobriety. So that, as I mentioned earlier in the program, As a result of drinking, a lot of bad things happen with people. They lose their job, they get into legal problems, they have health issues now, and the doctors, while they may not listen to the family members, but a lot of times when the doctors say, hey, you're going to die if you continue to drink. Look at your eyes, it's getting yellow, your liver is already swollen, you know, um, or they may have other health conditions. And then families may say, look, you know what, like I mentioned earlier on, if you decide to go for help, you have our support. But if you want to continue to use, you have no support. In fact, some family members put down the boundaries. You have to set boundaries, and don't put down boundaries if you can't maintain them. Don't say, look, if you use and come back here, we're going to put you out from the house when you are not willing to do that. I know mothers and fathers say that, mothers in particular, and when he come crying, they open the door and let him in. Don't let the father know. And once you start doing that, you have reneged on your promise, and the alcoholic or drug addict is going to assume, well, look, they are just, like we say, blowovers. They will just say those things, but they don't really mean it. No, 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 that will not work. If you can't keep a promise, don't make it. So that you set down clear boundaries and you stick to them. If you can't maintain a contract with a person, don't make the promise. Now, it is said, the same way friends could carry you, and they say friends don't bring you back, but friends could bring you back. You know, Peer pressure could cause a person to drink. I know that. I have had that experience myself. But similarly, the peer pressure from a support group, and this is one of the reasons why NA and AA is successful. Because, when family or a professional tell a person to stop drinking. I have heard that comment, because I was part of a program at one time where we trained professionals, CARIAD, for instance, the Caribbean Institute on Alcoholism and Drug Addiction, where some of the facilitators were not alcoholics. So during the break or on the evenings, they will go for their little beer or so, and the participants will, or the people in recovery will say, but wait, they're telling us that we should not drink and we shouldn't do this. But look, they are drinking and alcohol is legal. And as I said earlier on, alcoholics and drug addicts are very good at rationalizing. They will look for justification why they should be allowed to continue to drink. And they will use this. And this is why a person who is drinking still, even though they be professional, they may not have the moral authority, they may not be as forceful because they are speaking from their brain, not necessarily their heart. And I want to make that distinction. That's what happens when you go to an AA meeting. People speak from their heart, they speak from their personal experiences. They're not making up stories, they're not telling you to stop. They are speaking about how they drank, how they got themselves into trouble, and now that they have stopped, what are happening, what are the things happening with them. And that, when you speak from the heart, you literally connect with the other person. The emotions that you are exuding at that point literally makes connection with the emotions of the other person. That's the best way I can put it. When you really, you really can't, this thing about telling people what to do as I say and not as I do, really has not been very effective, especially with parents and children and so on. But the best teacher is example. Example is the best teacher. And and this is why alcoholics and drug addicts in recovery have such a great advantage when it comes to helping other alcoholics and drug addicts, because they never talk down to the alcoholic. They don't go and say, boy, look, you're drinking too much, look, you're causing problem, look how you're looking, No. They talk about themselves. They say, boy, you remember when I used to drink? You know, this is what used to happen, and this is what I thought. I used to think everybody didn't like me. They were just trying to scapegoat me, and all of that. But the truth is, I couldn't stop. And they would relate their own story, and so that the other person listening don't feel threatened. To that extent, sometimes professionals who have had the experience can use what is called self-disclosure to help the person to trust them and build a relationship that they can really use. So people relate better to peers than to authority figures. Because an alcoholic and a drug addict might have had this for their lifetime. You know, the parents talking down to them, then the wife talking down to them, and then the colleagues and the boss, everybody talking down to them. So they fed up being talked down to. So they just from the time you start sounding authoritative, they turn off. That's how they cope. They don't listen to you. But when friends, people, you know, in communication, there's a very good book that was written by a guy named Eric Burns. It's called Transactional Analysis. Where we relate in three ways. We can relate as a parent to a child, as talking down. We can relate as child to parent, where we look up to them for everything. We don't want to think for ourselves. They decide for us. Or we can relate to a person, adult to adult, and which is the more healthier of the relationships, where we speak on the level. So it is important too that people who are in recovery are able to demonstrate in actual real terms that look, especially where this person and the person who is currently using used to drink or lime together. Or you remember how I used to drink, you remember how the things is, and look at me today. Even without saying a word, this person is giving a powerful message by just the way they present themselves. Because at one time they had no shoes to wear, and now they're coming to a meeting in a beautiful car. They're well groomed, they have good clothes, they have money now, they look different, they look healthy, they speak better. All of these are powerful messages to the person who is still drinking, especially if you know how that person used to drink. Now, it is also important for some people that they have medical support. They may be well motivated. I work with several people like that, who really were highly motivated. They realized they had a problem, but when they went into withdrawal, they couldn't deal with it. The only way they know how to cope with it was to go and take a drink. But now, with acupuncture, we can deal with that. The acupuncture severely reduces the withdrawal symptoms, so the person who's well motivated can have a very good fighting chance at staying sober. For others, they may need medical support, and there are many kinds of drugs that have been used. I know in the States they use methadone and all of that for opioid addiction. But then eventually some people become addicted to the drugs. Like in Trinidad, they've used sedatives to help people come off alcohol, only to find that a lot of people now become dependent on the sedative, which is just as bad. And this is why when I worked at Cora Hospital, I worked in medical fraternity. I realized that you can't really use drugs to, to treat drug addiction. What you're doing really, you're substituting. And if you don't have a good program to wean the person off, it's just a question of time that they'll go back to using both the prescription drugs as well as the alcohol, the drug of their choice. So, this is why acupuncture has such a great advantage in that you cannot become dependent on acupuncture. Acupuncture doesn't give you a high, but it brings you up. If you are anxious, it calms you down. If you were depressed, it will bring you up. And then it's up to you to stay sober. Then, of course, the person will need to learn new coping strategies, you know, because a lot of people, especially those who started using drugs early in their life, when they should be learning how to cope with certain emotions, um, loss and failure and challenges and all of that and conflict resolution. they would have escaped by using drugs. Now they have to learn new techniques, how to deal with these old problems. So that this is why counseling and support after they have stopped is critical. Family therapy is also important. The family also needs to understand the nature of the person now in recovery, the support that they necessarily need to give them. And of course, there's so many other methods. You have to, of course, help the person to trust what in the recovery circles, they will trust the counselor. If they went to AA, they trust in a higher power. And again, there are still other issues that a person may want to that may prevent them from seeking help and staying sober. So that a lot of people will go to the meeting, but the meeting is just probably for an hour and a half in the afternoon. And thank God now we have meetings online. But they need to have a social network that is supportive. And now I know that a lot of AA groups have started chat groups on WhatsApp that is available to people even outside of the meetings. If they're getting the urge, they can text somebody and they can get support. They can have somebody, a sponsor now who can talk to them, so that stopping is important, but staying stopped is critical, so that for the person who has stopped and who has been into treatment, who is coming to counseling, outpatient therapy is important. Having a sponsor or a mentor is important. Having going to AA, there's a saying, meet and makers make it. And of course, in some cases, medication is necessary. But wherever medicine is prescribed, there must be a plan, an exit plan to, to how to get the person off. Now, again, there are relapse prevention strategies, but I know we're coming up on time, and maybe on the next occasion we can look at some of the relapse prevention strategies. But at this point, it would be good that people in recovery has someone they could call. They, of course, an urge to use the drugs only lasts about, it's estimated, 7 seconds. So if you're getting the urge, you're in recovery and you're getting the urge, there are a few things you can do. Remove yourself from the place where you're getting the urge. If the place is triggering, is one of your triggers. Take something sweet if you're not diabetic. Call someone, put it off for a few minutes and you'll see. Eventually the urge will pass. Some people will pray, God help me to get over this urge. So that, again, I want to, as we coming up on the hour, just to summarize some of what I've said this morning. You cannot force recovery on a person, but you can influence it powerfully by not enabling the person to continue to use, allowing them to suffer the consequences of their behavior so far as is possible, and letting them know that help is available, that compassion works better than confrontation. In fact, in my practice, even at Cora when I worked there, we coined a new word. We would say, we need to care front, not confront. We need to care front. While we addressing the problem, we addressing it because of love and compassion. We let the person know, look, I'm only doing this because I care about you. I just don't want to shame you into doing. And let them know that intervention actually saves lives. And of course, that is self-evident when they go to the AA meetings and so on. They would see so many people now, some of whom they would have known or drank with, who's staying sober and putting their life together again. And that recovery is possible at any age and at any stage. In fact, as I mentioned earlier on, the more worse off the person appear to be, is the more ready they are for recovery. Because, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, it'll tell you most people have to hit rock bottom. But today, we don't wait till they hit rock bottom, they lose everything. We bring up the bottom to hit them, as we say, by helping them to develop insight and motivation for recovery. So that in our closing, I would want to say that addiction is a disease, not a destiny. Addiction is a disease, not a destiny. When we approach people with love, we set boundaries and we offer them the right tools, we can help them walk through the door of recovery one step at a time. And that is the formula that is used in recovery. You don't have to stop for the rest of your life. All you have to do is stop for today, one day at a time. And if you have to stop today, you just tell yourself, you see, right now, I'm not going to take that smoke. And I know I'm not going to die if I don't take it. Right now, I'm not going to take that drink. I'll find something else. I'll drink something else. I'll talk to somebody else. And days will grow into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. And before you know it, you know, today I am 41 years, 11 months, and 9 days sober. And I too started from that first day, the 11th of December 1983. And I too thought, boy, I don't know if I could make it because I tried this so many times in the past and failed. I had stopped trying to try. I had stopped trying to try. And but I prayed and I stayed away one day. I told myself, yes, I could make one day. And you too, listening, you can make one day. So if you're having difficulty, I could be reached at 671-3040. That is 671-3040. Or you may text 768-5925, 768-5925. And as I said before, the program is recorded. It will be posted on YouTube, Facebook, and you can go back to it. You can refer this to other friends who you think might benefit from it. And of course, I want stay sober one day at a time until we meet again next week, Thursday. Thank you and thank the people at Radio and TV Jagriti for hosting this program as a public service for all our brothers and sisters. They are doing this free of charge, giving valuable radio and television time as a community service, as a responsible corporate entity, and we are all grateful for that. So thank you again, and see you next week.